What is up, everyone? Welcome back to a video. Hope y'all have an amazing day as usual. If you're new, please make sure to like, subscribe, and always comment down below. Today we're going to be taking a look at the best parts of each state, okay? And each state is different in its own right, and I think that ultimately every state in the country has good and bad parts. But today we're going to look at which parts of the state is the best and which part would be my favorite. And if I was going to visit this state, this would probably be the part of the state that I would visit first. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. Let's first start with the state of Alabama. My favorite part of the state of Alabama would have to be the northern part of Alabama, generally anything north of Birmingham. While there's not really much in Birmingham, the really nice city in northern Alabama is Huntsville. While most people consider Alabama to be a pretty poor and backward state, Huntsville is the exact opposite of that. There are plenty of engineers, doctors, PhDs, and there's even a space scene here. There's even a growing tech scene. Huntsville is gaining population, and it is really different from the rest of Alabama. While technically the Appalachian Trail starts in Alabama, the Appalachian Mountains pretty much end or begin in Alabama. Northern Alabama is far more mountainous and hilly than the rest of the state, and there are plenty of mountains. And there's also Guntersville Lake, which is one of the longest lakes in the South, and it's absolutely gorgeous. For Alaska, my favorite part of the state would have to be the Anchorage area, for obvious reasons, considering that most of Alaska is either too cold or uninhabitable. Anchorage, of course, is the largest city in Alaska with a population of over 200,000, which is pretty big for Alaskan standards. It feels like a city, it's not boring, so it's not like the rest of Alaska in that sense. And about an hour south of Anchorage is Whittier, Alaska. The entire town is in this building. Everything for the town. The people, the restaurants, the government buildings, the post office, everything. And look at that view in the background. Just north of Anchorage is Denali National Park, home to the largest mountain in America at over 20,000 feet. So you can go from city to the tallest mountain in about an hour's drive, which is pretty cool, and this is probably why it's the best part of Alaska. Here we go to Arizona, my least favorite state. My favorite part of the state is definitely not the Phoenix area, and this state is literally melting. It's also not the gorgeous desert state that everyone thinks it is. It's mostly just flat, boring desert for hundreds of miles, although there is one saving grace, and that is the Grand Canyon. The scenery here is actually unbelievable and just simply breathtaking. Just look at this. For the state of Arkansas, the best part of the state is the northwest part of the state, without a doubt. This part of the state is home to the Ozarks and is very beautiful. In fact, Arkansas is nicknamed the natural state due to all of its natural beauty. Northwest Arkansas is also home to the cities of Bentonville, Rogers, Springdale, and Fayetteville, which is one of the fastest growing parts of the country. Most of these cities are very safe and relatively affordable, so if you're moving to Arkansas, this would probably be the best part of the state to move to. Bentonville is actually home to the headquarters of Walmart, which is the largest retail store in the world. Just look at all the Walmarts in northwestern Arkansas, it's crazy. As much as I hate on the state of California, I have to admit it's a very beautiful state. I was thinking about doing Southern California because I love San Diego, but you have LA, and LA is a nightmare, so without a doubt, the best part of California has to go to Northern California, but not the Silicon Valley. This part of the state is very rural and has some of the most beautiful scenery in the country. There are even volcanoes in Northern California. Northern California is also home to the Redwoods National Park, which has the tallest trees in the world. The natural beauty in this part of the state is just incredible, and this is probably why I have a love-hate relationship with the state of California. For the state of Colorado, it's kind of hard to choose because I don't really dislike any part of the state, but if I had to choose a favorite part, it would probably have to be the Denver metro area. Denver is one of the most beautiful cities in the country, and the population is booming, although that's coming with its own problems. Also in this part of the state is Rocky Mountain National Park, which has some of the most beautiful mountain ranges in the country. For the state of Connecticut, my favorite part would have to be southern Connecticut, but not that little southwest corner of the state in Fairfield County. I'm talking about the New Haven area. This part of the state is home to the city of New Haven, which is one of my favorite cities. It's really an underrated city. If you're in Connecticut, definitely go to New Haven. It's home to Yale University, an Ivy League school, and is one of the most beautiful college campuses in the country. And of course, there's the New Haven pizza, which is some of the best pizza in the country. For the state of Delaware, my favorite part would have to be Southern Delaware. Southern Delaware is home to some of the nicest beaches on the East Coast. Places like Fenwick Island, Bethany Beach, Rehoboth Beach, Dewey Beach, and Lewis are all absolutely beautiful and are some of the most underrated beaches. I highly recommend you check them out. The rest of southern Delaware is some small forests and is relatively rural. There's even some swamps as well, so you have a mix of everything. Now for Florida, which is one of my least favorite states, the only part of the state that I actually kind of like would be the Panhandle. While Florida doesn't share a lot of similarities with other southern states, this part of the state is by far the most similar to the rest of the South, which is funny because the further north in Florida you drive, the more southern it gets. This part of the state is home to Pensacola Beach, which supposedly has the whitest sand in the world and some really, really clear waters. Destin Beach is actually even nicer than Pensacola. And if beaches aren't your thing, then there are plenty of pine tree forests. They call this part of the state the Redneck Riviera. It's absolutely beautiful. Although my favorite city in Georgia is Savannah, I have to admit that the surrounding parts of Savannah are pretty boring. So therefore, my favorite part of Georgia has to be northern Georgia. This part of the state is home to Atlanta, one of the most bustling cities in the country that is rapidly growing and is probably one of the most important cities in the South. This part of the state is also home to Chattahoochee National Forest, which has some of the most beautiful mountains in the South. Northern Georgia is also where the Appalachian Trail starts, or ends, depending on which way you look at it. This is definitely my favorite part of the state. Although I don't know much about Hawaii, I would have to say that my favorite part of the state would have to go to Maui. Maui has beautiful beaches and is really good for vacations, but if you don't really like beaches, there are plenty of other options in Maui. There are plenty of volcanoes across this tiny island, and it's really sad what's going on with the forest fires. Hopefully they can figure that out. My favorite part of Idaho would have to be the far northern part of the state. This is home to the city of Coeur d'Alene, which is a really, really beautiful place that a lot of tourists go to. There's several forests and mountains in this part of the state, and you get really close to Canada, so the scenery really starts to kick in. Illinois is a pretty boring state as a whole, so it should be no surprise that my favorite part of the state is the Chicago area. Chicago is a very beautiful city and has many tourist attractions. I really recommend that you visit Chicago. I really want to visit it one day. So far, it just seems like a very cool city, and that's why it's my favorite part of Illinois. For Indiana, I would have to choose Northwest Indiana. In this part of the state is the city of South Bend, which is making a comeback from its Rust Belt days, and it's also home to Notre Dame University. Northwestern Indiana is also on the Great Lakes, so you have several decent beaches, and it's also home to the Indiana Dunes. Yes, there's actually pretty scenery in Indiana, not just flat farmland. As boring as Iowa is, my favorite part of the state would have to be the southeastern part of the state. This is home to Iowa 80 in Walcott, Iowa, the largest truck stop in the world. It's pretty nice to have this truck stop in the middle of Interstate 80, one of the most boring highways in America. You also have Davenport, Iowa, which isn't really a big city, but it's pretty nice for Iowa standards. Not much here. Also in this part of the state is Fort Madison, one of the most important cities for freight railroads. This part of the state is also on the mighty Mississippi River. Kansas is a really boring state, but my favorite part would have to be the northeast corner. This is home to Kansas City, Kansas, which is not as cool as the Missouri side, but you also have Overland Park, Shawnee, and Olaf, which rank as some of the nicest places you can live in the country almost every year. Although I love most parts of Kentucky, my favorite part of the state would have to be eastern Kentucky. Although it's the poorest part of the state, it's the most beautiful. It's home to the Appalachian Mountains, which are absolutely beautiful here in Kentucky. Without a doubt, my favorite part of Louisiana would have to be the southern part of the state. Of course, there's New Orleans, which is one of the greatest cities to visit in the U.S. You also have Bourbon Street, which is party central. There's also Mardi Gras. And if you appreciate French architecture, there's plenty of that in New Orleans. The rest of southern Louisiana are swamps and bayous filled with alligators and seafood boils and really good food. Sadly, this part of the state is sinking really fast and in a couple decades might not even exist. It's actually really sad. For Maine, I really wanted to choose the northern part of the state due to its isolation and natural beauty, but there's not much to do up there and it is very cold. And the bottom of Maine is basically Massachusetts. So I went with the mid coast, the area north of Portland and south of Bangor. Portland is a really nice city that I highly recommend you visit. Of course, the mid-coast is home to some of the most beautiful coastline in the country. There are many cool small towns, and of course, there is Acadia National Park and Bahaba. For Maryland, I would have to say that the western part of the state is my favorite. This part of the state is home to the Appalachian Mountains, and for Maryland is really beautiful. An interesting part of the geography in the state is that it is so narrow that you could drive from West Virginia into Maryland and through Pennsylvania in 5 minutes. So you could say I drove through a whole state in 5 minutes. For Massachusetts, I would have to say the eastern part of the state is the best in the Boston metro area. Of course, we have Boston, which is one of the largest cities in America and is also very, very historic. Although one thing you'll have to get used to in Boston is the horrible traffic. And of course, there is Salem, Massachusetts, which is known for its really old historic houses, witchcraft, and everything haunted. And then there's Quincy, Massachusetts, which is home to the first Dunkin' Donuts. For Michigan, my favorite part of the state would have to be the southeastern corner of the state. Of course, this part of the state is home to Detroit, the largest city in Michigan. And although Detroit has a bad reputation, the city is making a comeback and has one of the largest and most bustling downtowns in America. There's also a large nightlife scene in Greektown, and Southwest Detroit and the Eastern Market are improving areas in the city. Also nearby are some really nice suburbs. Places like Grosse Pointe and Bloomfield Hills are some of the nicest and most wealthy suburbs in the country. And then there's Dearborn, which has the largest Muslim population in America. For Minnesota, the best part of the state would have to be the northeastern part of the state. This is home to the city of Duluth, which is the largest city in this part of the state, but it really isn't that big. It's pretty decent, though. Most of northeast Minnesota is made up of forest, in particular Superior National Forest. And of course, you're right on Lake Superior, which is, I would say, the most beautiful Great Lake. So this is just a really nice part of the state. It gets very cold, though. For Missouri, I would have to choose the eastern central part of the state, which is home to St. Louis. Although I love the Ozark part of southeastern Missouri, I don't think it really compares to the beautiful city of St. Louis. And they have good barbecue here. For Mississippi, I would have to go with the southeastern part of the state. In this part of the state is the city of Hattiesburg, which is a pretty nice place, especially for Mississippi standards. You have Biloxi, which is the casino and resort capital of the Deep South. All over the place are casinos, hotels, and resorts, so definitely do some gambling if you're there. If you just want a nicer beach, I think Gulfport is the best place to live in this part of the state or visit if you're just visiting. But overall, southern Mississippi is definitely the nicest part of the state. Just like for Mississippi, my favorite part of Montana would have to be the southeast corner of the state. Here you'll find the city of Miles City, which has a really true western vibe to it. Most of this part of the state is pretty boring, but you still get an authentic Montana feel. Although Nebraska is a very boring state, the one exception would be the southeastern part of the state. This is home to the largest city in the state, Omaha, which is a relatively fast-growing city and is a really, really nice city to live in. There's also Lincoln, the state capital, which is also a decent place, although in my opinion it has a pretty ugly Capitol building. So there you have it. Those are the best parts of each state. So my plan originally was to do all 50 states in this video, but I think that would take way too long. I mean, this video is already like 15 to 20 minutes long anyway, so I just wouldn't want to drag it on for any longer. So that's it for today's video. I'm probably going to post the part 2 tomorrow, so that'll be Monday, so make sure you're on the lookout for that. That'll be it for today's video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and God bless all you guys.